Rules. Rules. Who needs rules, right? The very thought of rules causes us to cringe. They go against our human nature because we desire freedom, right? No? Land of the free, home of the brave. We don't desire rules. Whether we desire rules or not, the reality is that our lives are surrounded by rules. There's these rules. Yeah, the rules of the road. Who said that? So, I'll tell you what, driving bus, I know people do not know the rules of the road. There are rules which govern which side of the road we drive on, where we can and cannot pass, where we can turn on red and where we can, and who should have the right of way and who should yield the right of way. There are the rules of the land. We call those laws. There are federal laws, including the federal tax code or rules. There are state rules. There are rules of the state. There are rules of the county and townships, and even the boroughs have rules. Even organizations have rules. Schools have rules. If you are involved in Otto Eldred at all, and you deal with elementary students, you know the idea of Paul Pry. Be right, stay right. Hands and feet to self. Use an inside voice. Be there, be ready. This week I had to pull those out on my bus and say, remember these rules? Clubs have rules. Churches have rules. Sometimes they're unwritten rules. Those are the worst. But in the Wesleyan Church, we have something called the discipline that governs us. It tells us what we can do and cannot do as a church. When we play sports, we have to abide by the rules to have an organized game, and everybody knows. Has anybody ever played a game with someone who decides to change the rules in the middle of the game? Yeah, you know those people. We have to abide by the rules to have an organized game. There are rules that tell us how to score, how to win. There are umpires and referees and judges there to enforce the rules. But probably, we know those rules exist, but probably what bothers us the most about rules is the fact that we think they're made to take away our freedom. We long for freedom. I mean, really, who doesn't like freedom, you know? Back in the 1960s, there was a famous motorcycle gang that you may have heard of called the Hells Angels. They were rather famous or infamous for their blatant disregard of the rules. Now, it's kind of interesting because even the Hells Angels have rules to be in their organization. Isn't that ironic? And you might think to say that we are anti-rules, but when it comes to rules, what we really mean is we don't want to get rid of the rules. We only want to be the ones who make them. You ever think about that? That's the real reason we don't like the rules, is because we just want to be the person to make the rules. And so the question becomes this morning is, why can't I make my own rules? Well, we talked about how Adam and Eve were deceived by Satan when God placed Adam in the Garden of Eden. God gave Adam one rule. One commandment that we're aware of. You may eat freely of every tree in the garden except the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. If you eat its fruit, you are sure to die. One rule. Think about that. One rule. Adam only had to follow one rule. Adam had all of God's glorious bounty. He could eat from any tree except one. That one tree began his downfall. And may I suggest this morning that one rule was a rule and had something to do about our love for God and our allegiance to Him. We are told, Jesus tells us, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord our God with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength. I really believe that one rule was saying, if you obey this one rule of not eating from the tree of good and evil, you will be able to follow every other rule in the world. I'll tell you what, same goes. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. If we could follow that one rule, we wouldn't need any other rules. Adam and Eve were deceived by Satan because Satan said that loving God and obeying His rule was bogus. It was counterfeit. That because God required love and obedience, God was not trustworthy. You know what? We as a human race have been following that lie ever since. God's one rule for Adam and Eve was a guardrail. It was a boundary. Let's fast forward 2,500 years from Adam and Eve. We are now standing at the bottom of Mount Sinai. And Moses is up in the clouds where he can't be seen. God is speaking. And God hands Moses and the Hebrews 10 commandments for living. The first 4 deal with our love for God, that He is the only one worthy of our praise and He is holy, and that we should love God with all of our heart, mind, and soul. And the last 6 deal with our love for others. Did you ever realize that the last 6 commandments are pretty much the basis for almost every civil and moral law on the face of the planet? In essence, God was saying, Israel, I love you more than you will ever know. Please don't break my 10 commandments. It will cost you everything I have for you. It will wreck your life. Now, you're probably wondering what those 10 commandments are, and I've got a little special for us this morning. This is our morning special, but you're going to have to participate. But only a couple of you know the song. So are you ready? All right, here we go. That's how we've been teaching kids. We have a song called the Bible. That's the book for me, and 10 Commandment Boogie, the Bible book Bob, and we've been teaching kids these truths with these songs. But God delivered the rules along with the promise. These rules are important. I love the fact in the middle of that bridge that says, some people say that I'm old-fashioned for believing in God's rules. They're just full. But the Bible, yes, that's the book for me. And it's full of unbelievable tools. God delivered the rules along with the promise that if His people followed them, they would be rewarded like no other. Look at Exodus 19, 5 and 6. Now, if you obey me along with the promise that Now, if you fully, let me try one more time. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations, you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. God has been dealing with me in this idea, and I don't know why it keeps coming up and over and over and over again. I keep hearing this one word. Obedience. Obedience. If you're on the internet, check out my blog, DaleArgott.com. Friday afternoon, I wrote a devotional. Guess what? Guess what it's about? Obedience. God has been pounding me with this thing. And He's telling us something. Rule number 1 tells us that God is God and God alone is God. There is none other. And yet so many times we want to be number 1. Have you ever thought about the consequences or the implications of being number 1? Go ahead. Do you really want to assume all the responsibility of God without any of His power? I am God alone, worship no other. Number one rule. If we only could get that one right. If we only could get that one right. And so we have to decide which way we're going to follow. We've got three choices. My life, my rules. A lot of people doing that, right? God's life, God's rules. There's people doing that. And there's this strange one. God's life, my rules. Unfortunately, there's a lot of believers out there who are doing number three. They say, I'm a Christian, but I want to live my own way. Well, are you really a believer if you can't obey God's rules? The only option that can really work is number two. When we submit to God and we obey Him, He becomes free to bless us. Our lives won't be perfect. They won't be conflict-free. They won't be without pain or mistakes, but they will be on track with God. And they will be alive and growing. When we don't obey, we get stuck and prevent God. And it also prevents us from God giving us a bigger and better life. And some people say, well, okay, so why do I have to follow the rules? Why can't God just accept me as I am, right? I am what I am, and that's all I am, said Popeye. Why can't God accept us as we are? The culture says we need to be tolerant. The culture says you need to accept me the way I am, because that's the way I am. The culture says that if we tell people that that's not the way you're supposed to be, we're judgmental. Tolerance says we should be permissive and undogmatic toward everyone else's beliefs. We look for tolerance and acceptance and wonder why God can't accept us as we are. You know why God can't accept us as we are? Because we are unholy and He is holy. He is a holy God. God sees sin clearly and cannot tolerate it. He knows that sin will kill us. He wants to give us relief from the pain that is destroying our lives. Did you know in Leviticus, it says it like 20 times? This is just one. For I am the Lord your God. You must consecrate yourselves and be holy because I am holy. Do not defile yourselves with any of these small animals that scurry along the ground. For I, the Lord, am the one who brought you up from the land of Egypt, that I might be your God. Therefore you must be holy, because I am holy. This, my friends, is the crux of the matter. God is holy, and we are unholy. After Moses was on Mount Sinai, they came down, and actually while he was still on the mountain, God gave Moses some instructions. And He told the people of Israel how He was going to dwell among them. Anybody want to take a guess of how God was going to dwell among the Israelites? It's called the tabernacle. And Kevin Myers, who put together this wonderful book that I've been reading that keeps pounding me about obedience, did a great video explanation of how the tabernacle moved the people of God from holy to unholy, from unholy to holy. So Christ has now become the high priest over all the good things that are to come. He has entered that great, more perfect tabernacle in heaven, which was not made by human hands and is not part of this created world. With His own blood, not the bloods of goats and calves, He entered the most holy place once for all time and secured our redemption forever. Under the old system, the blood of goats and bulls and the ashes of a young cow could cleanse people's bodies from ceremonial impurity. Just think how much more the blood of Christ will purify our consciences from sinful deeds, so that we can worship the living God. For by the power of the eternal Spirit, Christ offered himself to God as a perfect sacrifice for our sins. That is why he is the one who mediates the new covenant between God and people, so that all who are called can receive the eternal inheritance God has promised for them. For Christ died to set them free from the penalty of the sins they had committed under that first covenant. Now, when someone leaves a will, it is necessary to prove that that person who made it is dead. The will goes into effect only after the person's death. While the person who made it is still alive, the will cannot be put into effect. In fact, according to the law of Moses, nearly everything was purified with blood. For without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness. That is why the tabernacle and everything in it, which are copies of things in heaven, had to be purified by the blood of animals. But the real things in heaven had to be purified with far better sacrifices than blood or animals. For Christ did not enter into a holy place made with human hands, which was only a copy of the true one in heaven. He entered into heaven itself to appear now before God on our behalf. And he did not enter heaven to offer himself again and again like the whole high priest here on earth who enters the most holy place year after year with the blood of an animal. If that had been necessary, Christ would have had to die again and again ever since the world began. But now, once for all time, he has appeared at the end of the age to remove sin by his own death and sacrifice. And just as each person is destined to die once and after that comes the judgment, so also Christ died once for all times as a sacrifice to take away the sins of many people. He will come again, not to deal with our sins, but to bring salvation to all who are eagerly waiting